Good evening, this is Daniel McCready, coming to you from the USDA Crop Disease Research Facility in Ames, Iowa. If you're picking this up, stay tuned. I'll be updating our situation here regularly. The date today is August 14th, 2027. I'm on shortwave frequency 14.300 MHz, continuously transmitting every evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you're hearing this, chances are you're already aware that we've entered a global crisis. I'll keep updating, as long as our backup generators hold up and I can still broadcast. If you can hear me clearly, please relay this message. Our communications are increasingly fragmented, and reliable information is critical now more than ever. First, some background. I'm a microbiologist, specializing in plant pathogens. Before all this started, I worked mostly on wheat rust and corn blight, basic agricultural threats. Never imagined I'd be dealing with something on this scale. My team here originally thought it was a simple fungal outbreak affecting crops, nothing more. But we were wrong, badly wrong. The situation escalated beyond our wildest expectations, becoming something much worse, something unprecedented. About 6 weeks ago, reports first came in from the northern agricultural belt around Grand Forks, North Dakota. Farmers noticed unusually rapid fungal infections in wheat and barley fields. Initial symptoms included a blackish, powdery growth on the crops and a quick spread that defied traditional fungicides. Similar reports soon emerged in southern Manitoba, Canada. Initially, the USDA and Canada's Ministry of Agriculture treated this as a severe but manageable agricultural emergency. However, within days, we received reports of livestock, primarily cattle and sheep, falling ill. Ranchers in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Saskatchewan observed disoriented animals showing neurological symptoms, difficulty standing, abnormal aggression, and eventually complete paralysis. Autopsies indicated the presence of the same fungal spores found in the affected crops, now colonizing the animals' nervous systems. I was on one of the first emergency response teams dispatched to a ranch in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. When we got there, it was clear something had crossed over from plant life into mammals, something we'd never witnessed at this scale. By late July, similar cases appeared in humans. Reports emerged from rural hospitals around Fargo and Moorhead, with patients presenting dizziness, headaches, respiratory distress, and cognitive disorientation. Most concerning was the rapid onset and progression of symptoms. Within 48 hours of infection, patients experienced severe mental confusion, loss of motor control, and eventually slipped into comatose states. Public health officials hesitated initially to draw conclusions, but it quickly became undeniable. Human infection had started, and it was spreading. The CDC and Health Canada set up emergency protocols, isolating towns, dispatching hazmat units, and implementing quarantines, but containment failed. Despite their best efforts, the fungus, now identified by genetic sequencing as a highly aggressive variant of Claviceps purpurea, similar to ergot, was airborne and spreading at rates epidemiologists could barely comprehend. Now let me be clear. This strain isn't ordinary ergot. It's resistant to nearly all antifungal treatments we have, including azoles and polyenes. Worse yet, this variant rapidly adapts, shifting its genomic structure with terrifying speed. In layman's terms, every time we throw medicine at it, the fungus evolves to resist almost immediately. Labs in Atlanta, Boston, and Winnipeg are all coordinating to find effective treatments, but nothing so far has halted the spread. By August honest, the federal government announced a state of emergency across the Midwest. Airports shut down. Interstates clogged with evacuees fleeing south and west. Cities like Minneapolis, Madison, Des Moines, and even as far south as Kansas City implemented strict curfews and shelter-in-place orders. I've got scattered reports that similar outbreaks began popping up in Europe, first in southern Germany, then rapidly spreading through eastern France and northern Italy. Global trade halted. Air travel suspended indefinitely. And as of today, we've lost contact entirely with Europe and most of Asia. Shortwave transmissions are sporadic and difficult to confirm. Here in Ames, We're fortunate, at least relatively speaking. We have underground emergency generators, ample supplies of food, water, and protective equipment. But communications outside the immediate area are deteriorating quickly. Internet access ceased 3 days ago. Cell towers are down. Our only reliable method now is this shortwave radio equipment. I'm accompanied by a handful of colleagues who remained at the facility after the mandatory evacuation. There's Dr. Eleanor Brooks, an expert mycologist who has been crucial in analyzing the pathogen, and Jake Alvarez, our IT technician who managed to rig this transmitter to reach longer distances. We have access to hazmat suits, respirators, sterilization equipment, and UV filtration, which has, for now, kept us safe from airborne spores. But morale is understandably low. Yesterday, we lost contact with FEMA's Regional Emergency Center in Kansas City. Before they went silent, they reported widespread panic, resource shortages, and multiple secondary outbreaks, despite strict quarantine measures. They estimated tens of thousands already infected in the Midwest alone. So, to anyone still out there, anyone listening, stay indoors, seal your ventilation as best as possible, and if you have HEPA filtration or UV sterilizers, keep them running constantly. Do not, I repeat, do not consume anything outdoors, especially crops or livestock, showing any blackish discoloration or abnormal growth. Boil your water and avoid exposure to open air as much as possible. Our priority right now is to understand how this variant of claviceps jumped species so effectively. Ergot traditionally affects grains and can occasionally cause illness in humans if contaminated bread or cereal is consumed. Historically, it's associated with outbreaks of convulsive and hallucinogenic episodes, famously linked to events like the Salem witch trials. But this variant is something else entirely. It doesn't require ingestion, simple inhalation is enough. It aggressively colonizes the respiratory tract, rapidly entering the bloodstream and crossing the blood-brain barrier within hours. We're continuing lab experiments with isolated samples to identify vulnerabilities, but the fungal spores aggressively breach containment attempts. Earlier today, Eleanor noted abnormal structural formations in spores collected from infected tissue samples. They appear designed for maximum penetration and neurological targeting, almost engineered in their efficiency. We don't yet know how or why this mutation emerged. One unsettling theory we're examining involves recent climate shifts, warmer summers, wetter winters, creating ideal breeding grounds for fungal pathogens. Overuse of fungicides may have inadvertently selected for a hyper-resistant strain. Whatever the origin, we're paying dearly now. Please see if you're hearing this broadcast, relay it onward. I'll transmit daily at the same frequency as long as possible. If you have critical information or can confirm developments in your area, broadcast responses between 1800 and 2000 hours Central Standard Time on this same shortwave channel. We desperately need any data that could help us stop this. Before I sign off today, a final note. Maintain vigilance against misinformation. Panic makes people desperate, and false reports are spreading faster than accurate news. Verify everything you hear. Trust only confirmed sources. Our best weapon now is information. Hello again, listeners. Daniel McCready here, coming to you live once more from the Crop Disease Research Facility in Ames, Iowa. Today is August 15th, 2027. Broadcasting as usual on frequency 14.300 megahertz at 1800 hours Central Standard Time. If you're hearing me clearly, please let others know and relay any confirmed information back to this frequency. Since yesterday's transmission, we've gathered additional updates about the fungal outbreak. I must warn you, the situation has rapidly deteriorated overnight. Reports reaching us via shortwave from various locations indicate the fungus has now spread to major urban areas. The latest information from Chicago paints a grim picture. Cook County Hospital and Rush University Medical Center reported massive influxes of infected patients, overwhelming emergency rooms. Patients are exhibiting severe neurological symptoms, convulsions, hallucinations, and aggressive behavior, all consistent with ergot alkaloid poisoning. Chicago PD, supported by Illinois National Guard units, attempted to enforce quarantine zones downtown, but containment efforts failed overnight. As of early this morning, Chicago's mayor ordered evacuation, but the roads heading south and west became hopelessly congested within hours. We've lost direct communication with Minneapolis and St. Paul entirely. The last clear message we received came from a paramedic, identified as Chloe Kim, broadcasting from an emergency triage site outside the Mall of America. Chloe reported widespread respiratory distress, hallucinations among infected patients, and alarming behavioral changes. According to her transmission, infected individuals seemed driven by confusion and extreme paranoia, complicating medical treatment and quarantine efforts. Shortly afterward, her transmission abruptly ceased, and we haven't received anything since. A similar scenario has unfolded in Des Moines, roughly 35 miles south of our location. Mercy Medical Center and Unity Point hospitals were quickly overwhelmed, forcing emergency services to establish makeshift clinics at Drake University and Principal Park Baseball Stadium. According to a brief transmission we received from someone identifying himself as Officer James Taylor of the Des Moines Police Department, quarantine zones quickly collapsed when thousands attempted to flee the city. Officer Taylor described scenes of unprecedented chaos along Interstate 35 southbound, with abandoned vehicles and families forced to seek shelter in nearby fields or rural communities. On a national scale, FEMA's regional command centers appear compromised or severely hampered. We received a shortwave transmission late last night from an amateur radio operator near Kansas City, identified as Mitchell Hart, a retired U.S. Army communications specialist. Mitchell reported that FEMA's Kansas City regional headquarters lost control after widespread fungal spore contamination inside their own HVAC systems. Key personnel rapidly fell ill, communications degraded, and emergency coordination ceased within hours. Mitchell relayed that he and several others retreated underground into a repurposed Cold War fallout shelter beneath Liberty Memorial to survive. He's attempting to maintain contact with other amateur radio operators throughout Missouri and Kansas, but transmissions are becoming sporadic due to power failures. We're also receiving troubling international developments. A shortwave transmission from Halifax, Nova Scotia, just this morning detailed large-scale evacuations and panic. Canadian Armed Forces units have struggled to maintain order, with the government relocating key personnel and citizens toward isolated military facilities in Newfoundland and Labrador. The transmission, from an individual named Captain Andrew Hartley, emphasized that the fungus had reached Halifax through maritime trade, originating from infected grain shipments. Maritime provinces face collapsing public health infrastructure due to the rapid fungal spread and lack of effective treatment options. Eleanor Brooks, our lead mycologist here at the Ames facility, confirmed something critical today. Genetic analysis from infected human tissue indicates the fungus rapidly modifies its genome upon infecting human hosts. The spores entering the respiratory system swiftly adapt their cell structures, developing specialized hyphal appendages that aggressively invade lung tissues and the bloodstream. From there, fungal mycelium quickly breaches the blood-brain barrier, embedding deeply within neurological tissue. In practical terms, it means once inhaled, the spores establish colonies inside the human nervous system faster than any pathogen previously encountered. Jake Alvarez, our technician, modified the facility's air filtration systems today, enhancing the HEPA and UV filters to maximum levels. So far, our containment protocols are holding, but every step outside demands full hazmat suits and respirators. Local air quality tests show steadily increasing concentrations of airborne spores in Ames. We anticipate it's only a matter of time before unprotected individuals in our immediate vicinity show symptoms. We've spotted people in the distance trying to reach the facility, but we've had to keep them at bay, warning them to seek shelter indoors elsewhere due to contamination risks. It's a heartbreaking necessity. Earlier today, we received a disturbing transmission from a farm family near Marshalltown, Iowa, approximately 40 miles east. The farmer, identifying himself as Carl Johansson, explained that most of his livestock perished overnight, exhibiting severe aggression and neurological impairment before collapsing into paralysis and death. His son and wife developed symptoms overnight, including persistent coughing, confusion, and erratic behavior. Before the transmission abruptly cut off, Carl pleaded desperately for advice on containment and survival. The silence afterward was one of the hardest moments we've faced. It's crucial, for anyone listening, to recognize initial symptoms quickly: persistent coughing, difficulty breathing, dizziness, severe headaches, confusion, and hallucinations. Immediate isolation is essential. Minimize airflow between rooms. If possible, create negative air pressure zones by sealing rooms with plastic sheets and tape, and directing airflow outward through filtered windows. If you have access to respirators, or even simple 95 masks, wear them constantly. Even a minor protective barrier could significantly reduce your exposure risk. Now, an update on the fungus itself. Preliminary studies conducted here overnight indicate high sensitivity to intense ultraviolet radiation and extreme heat above 150 degrees Fahrenheit. While that information offers limited comfort for immediate treatment in humans, it may be viable for sterilizing small spaces, clothing, or equipment. If you possess UV sterilization devices, use them aggressively on any materials or surfaces exposed to open air. A quick technical note: shortwave operators who've maintained communications, thank you. Our current station, powered by underground diesel generators, remains operational. We can continue transmissions at least for another 2 weeks, based on fuel reserves. I urge anyone capable of generating or relaying accurate, confirmed information to contact us nightly between 1800 and 2000 hours Central Standard Time on frequency 14.300 MHz. We're compiling data into detailed field notes, hoping to find weaknesses in the pathogen's structure or life cycle. Lastly, some personal reflections. It's difficult to imagine just how quickly civilization's thin veneer begins to unravel. In a matter of days, ordinary life trips to grocery stores, attending schools, commuting to workas become impossible. Despite this, we must remain calm and think clearly. Panic accelerates chaos, reducing our chances of effective containment and survival. The knowledge we share may prove decisive. That's all for now. Tomorrow, I'll continue reporting as we receive and confirm more details. If you're hearing this, know you're not alone. Humanity has endured crises before, and we will do so again. Stay sheltered, stay cautious, and maintain hope. This is Daniel McCready, broadcasting from the Crop Disease Research Facility in Ames, Iowa. The date is August 16th, 2027. As before, I'm transmitting on 14.300 MHz, nightly at 1800 hours Central Standard Time. If you're hearing this clearly, I encourage you to relay confirmed information on your situation. Our communication channels are becoming increasingly fragile, and accurate information is our lifeline. Today's updates, unfortunately, are increasingly grim. We lost shortwave contact with Chicago just after midnight. Our last confirmed transmission came from an operator calling himself Theo, broadcasting from a reinforced apartment near Navy Pier. He described widespread confusion downtown, massive disruptions in food supply chains, and failed evacuations. Theo also noted significant military activity around O'Hare Airport. Just before his signal went silent, he mentioned seeing large-scale helicopter movements toward Lake Michigan. It's unclear whether these were evacuation efforts or strategic repositioning. Des Moines is now entirely silent. Officer James Taylor's broadcasts ceased early this morning. Before losing contact, he reported that most city services had collapsed, including electricity, water treatment, and law enforcement command structures. Taylor's final message expressed concern that a mass exodus toward rural Iowa had caused violent confrontations at highway checkpoints established by local militias and National Guard troops. Closer to our position here in Ames, The situation deteriorated dramatically overnight. We've been observing increased numbers of infected individuals roaming openly on the outskirts of town. Eleanor and I used binoculars from the rooftop observation deck this afternoon and noted individuals displaying severe neurological symptoms, such as stumbling movements, apparent visual disorientation, and unpredictable aggression toward others. The city center is empty, but we spotted groups sheltering in buildings around Iowa State University, including Hilton Coliseum and the Veterinary Medicine Complex. Within the facility itself, our resources remain stable, but anxiety levels are climbing. Jake Alvarez, our IT technician, confirmed that cellular networks and broadband internet throughout Iowa are now entirely offline. Regional emergency radio frequencies previously monitored by law enforcement and state emergency services are mostly silent, except for automated FEMA emergency broadcasts urging residents to shelter indoors indefinitely. We've also seen unusual and concerning fungal growth patterns near our ventilation intakes, despite rigorous filtration protocols. Eleanor and I conducted field tests this morning, collecting samples in full hazmat gear. The results were troubling. The fungus is developing rapid resistance, even to ultraviolet exposure. Previously effective sterilization methods now require significantly increased intensity and duration, raising concerns about power usage and generator capacity. One key biological discovery emerged late last night. Upon closer microscopic examination, Eleanor identified unique neural-seeking mycelium strands forming distinct patterns resembling animal nervous systems. The implications are chilling. The fungus appears to intentionally map and colonize neural tissue, exploiting the host's nervous system not just for nutrients, but possibly influencing behavior directly. She believes these adaptations indicate the fungus is evolving rapidly, much faster than natural selection typically allows, raising uncomfortable questions about external factors driving these mutations. Globally, shortwave radio transmissions indicate severe escalation. At 0300 hours, we briefly connected with an amateur operator named Henrik Larsson near Copenhagen, Denmark. Larsson described massive outbreaks across Europe, particularly severe in urban areas like Paris, Berlin, and Rome. European authorities reportedly established containment zones around major population centers, but failed to halt infections spreading through ventilation systems in crowded apartments and metro networks. Henrik relayed that NATO command structures were mobilizing in northern Europe, attempting to consolidate unaffected regions, particularly in isolated Nordic areas. However, his transmission ended abruptly, and we've had no updates from Europe since. In Asia, fragmented transmissions via operators in Japan and South Korea suggested rapid fungal spread through dense urban regions. An operator identifying herself as Miho Kawashima broadcasted briefly from a bunker outside Osaka, Japan, reporting government collapse, severe infrastructure damage due to panicked evacuations, and an overwhelmed health system. Tokyo and Seoul had reportedly descended into chaos, with emergency services unable to respond to widespread medical crises and mass hysteria. Shortly thereafter, Kawashima's signal was lost, leaving us without further details. Back in North America, a shortwave operator near Dallas, Texas Lieutenant Carla Ramirez, U.S. Army Medical Corps transmitted briefly this morning. Ramirez confirmed southern U.S.'s cities like Houston, Austin, and Dallas were experiencing major outbreaks, driven by refugees fleeing Midwest contamination zones. The sheer volume of evacuees overwhelmed emergency services, turning major highways into massive parking lots stretching for miles. Lieutenant Ramirez reported that military forces from Fort Hood and Fort Bliss were mobilizing to establish quarantine zones, but already faced shortages of respirators, protective gear, and antifungal medications. Her transmission ended with urgent advice for listeners to avoid traveling southward, citing escalating violence at overwhelmed checkpoints. In terms of immediate survival advice, I reiterate the importance of strict indoor isolation. Seal windows and doors tightly, use multiple layers of plastic and tape to reinforce barriers, and maintain continuous air filtration if possible. boiling water remains critical. For food preparation, we recommend high-temperature cooking methods that exceed 150 degrees Fahrenheit for sustained periods to ensure thorough sterilization. If your supplies allow, establish a room specifically for sterilizing clothing and equipment before re-entering your living area. Additionally, some operators have asked about protective gear alternatives in the absence of hazmat suits. If respirators or N95 masks aren't available, even makeshift cloth masks soaked in a diluted solution of bleach or alcohol, then thoroughly dried, might provide minimal protection against spores. Though limited, any protective measure reduces inhalation risk significantly. Finally, to all operators able to transmit, please communicate your location, infection status in your area, resources available, and any successful containment methods. Maintaining informational clarity is our strongest defense against panic and confusion. On a personal note, morale inside our facility is increasingly fragile. Today, Eleanor admitted privately she hasn't heard from her husband and children since initial outbreaks near Kansas City. Jake remains upbeat outwardly, but confessed he's worried about his sister, a nurse in Omaha who stopped responding 2 days ago. For myself, I try to keep busy, maintaining a professional routine to stave off anxiety, but at times, the silence from the outside world becomes deafening. Yet we persist because knowledge and calm are our best tools. Every transmission we receive, every confirmed piece of information, contributes to understanding this pathogen and might ultimately lead to effective containment strategies. To anyone listening tonight, remember we are stronger together. Share knowledge, verify carefully, and remain hopeful, even in these darkening hours. I'll broadcast again tomorrow at 1800 hours Central Standard Time on frequency 14.300 MHz. Until then, stay safe, stay alert, and keep your transmissions coming. In the last 24 hours, the situation in Ames and beyond has sharply deteriorated. I want to prepare you up front. Today's updates are especially difficult. This morning, we lost power from the main electrical grid entirely. Our facility is now operating solely on backup diesel generators. Fuel supplies will sustain operations for approximately 10 more days, assuming careful rationing. Jake Alvarez is monitoring consumption and has powered down all non-essential equipment, but will maintain radio broadcasts as long as possible. We can no longer safely leave the building, even in protective suits. Overnight, the concentration of airborne fungal spores in our immediate vicinity surged dramatically. Eleanor Brooks conducted microscopic analysis of air samples drawn through our ventilation filters this morning. Results showed unprecedented spore density levels we previously believed impossible outdoors. To put it bluntly, the air outside is currently hazardous, even lethal, to anyone without full respiratory protection. Through rooftop observation, we've confirmed the city of Ames is now effectively deserted. Aside from sporadic groups, visibly suffering from advanced infection. These infected individuals show disturbing neurological impairment, loss of fine motor skills, unpredictable aggression, and apparent hallucinations or psychosis. We've repeatedly attempted radio contact with Ames Police Department, Iowa State University emergency teams, and Mary Greeley Medical Center. There's been no response for 24 hours now. Nationally, the collapse continues at an alarming rate. Overnight, we received fragmented transmissions from multiple amateur operators throughout the United States. Here are some confirmed highlights. Operator Marcus Rivers, broadcasting from Columbus, Ohio, confirmed severe fungal contamination across major population centers in the Midwest and Northeast. Columbus, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh have experienced near-total breakdowns in public order, healthcare infrastructure, and supply chains. Rivers described widespread infection, overwhelming hospitals, with medical staff rapidly falling ill due to inadequate protective gear. His transmission ended abruptly, leaving his current status unknown. Near Indianapolis, Indiana, we briefly connected with retired firefighter Terrence Blake. Terrence described unprecedented chaos, abandoned military checkpoints along Interstate 70, and massive numbers fleeing southward towards Kentucky and Tennessee, despite repeated warnings. Blake confirmed the Indiana National Guard had withdrawn to defensive positions around Camp Atterbury. They were reportedly low on supplies, ammunition, and protective gear, forced to refuse entry to desperate civilians attempting to reach safety. Further south, we had brief contact with Officer Lindsay Ward, broadcasting from a police station in Memphis, Tennessee. Officer Ward described catastrophic conditions due to a huge influx of refugees from northern states, overwhelming local shelters and emergency facilities. She mentioned escalating conflicts between evacuees and locals, widespread looting for food and medical supplies, and law enforcement becoming increasingly unable to intervene effectively. Her final transmission indicated plans to evacuate westward toward rural Arkansas for safety. We also received international shortwave updates overnight. From Monterrey, Mexico, we heard briefly from radio operator Luis Gonzalez. Luis reported severe outbreaks in major Mexican cities, worsened by refugees flooding southward across the Texas-Mexico border. Gonzalez described chaotic scenes at border crossings, overwhelmed checkpoints, thousands stranded without resources, and increasing fungal contamination, spreading rapidly through makeshift camps. From London, England, operator Simon Bailey broadcast a short, grim message indicating complete failure of public infrastructure, widespread panic, and significant casualties in large metropolitan areas. Bailey stated that governmental control had effectively collapsed, and military forces had abandoned containment zones due to rapidly spreading infection. His broadcast was short-lived and deeply troubling. In Asia, no new contacts have been established since yesterday's brief transmission from Osaka, Japan. We're assuming major communication networks across the region have collapsed entirely. Regarding the fungus itself, Eleanor Brooks made an alarming new discovery earlier today. Examination of infected tissue samples revealed the fungus is now exhibiting signs of intelligence, or at least complex coordinated behavior. Hyphal networks within infected individuals are forming interconnected structures resembling neurological pathways. While difficult to confirm conclusively, these observations suggest the fungus might be influencing host behavior, directly inducing aggression, hallucinations, and loss of control over basic cognitive functions. Such rapid behavioral changes are unprecedented and deeply concerning. On practical survival guidance, as air contamination has drastically worsened, indoor shelter remains essential. Reinforce all possible ventilation entry points, ducts, doors, windows. Regularly sterilize interiors using high-intensity ultraviolet lights if you have them, and boil water vigorously before use. High-temperature cooking remains critical for food sterilization. If you possess respirators or masks, wear them continuously, even indoors. It's also important to isolate individuals exhibiting early symptoms immediately to minimize further transmission. One additional urgent caution: avoid unnecessary outdoor activity at all costs. The fungal spores in the air outside have reached unprecedented concentrations, making even brief exposure extremely dangerous. Travel, even locally, now carries significant infection risks. Maintain communication by radio or telephone, if still functional, and preserve your resources. Emotionally, today has been especially taxing. Eleanor experienced a severe anxiety attack this afternoon after unsuccessful attempts to contact her family near Kansas City. Jake managed to calm her, but morale is steadily weakening. The psychological strain of isolation, uncertainty, and witnessing societal collapse is profound. I urge anyone listening, support each other emotionally, share practical survival advice, and stay calm. We must remain composed and rational in our decisions. Despite everything, we've committed ourselves to maintaining these nightly broadcasts, as we recognize their critical role in preserving essential information and hope. Before signing off, I'd like to directly address anyone still monitoring this frequency. Your updates matter deeply to us. If able, please continue to transmit local status reports, effective containment measures you've discovered, and any hopeful information. no matter how small. We haven't lost our humanity yet. Each piece of knowledge shared can help others survive one more day. Hold on to that, because we need each other now more than ever. This is Daniel McCready, signing off tonight from Ames, Iowa. Stay safe, everyone. I'll be back on frequency 14.300 megahertz tomorrow at 1800 hours Central Standard Time. Good night, and take care. Daniel McCready here once again, broadcasting from the Crop Disease Research Facility in Ames, Iowa. Today is August 18th, 2027. If you're receiving me clearly, I'm transmitting on shortwave frequency 14.300 megahertz at 1800 hours Central Standard Time. As always, any reliable information you have, please relay it. Every transmission helps. Unfortunately, today's news is especially difficult. Overnight, we've observed a near-total collapse of local communications. Shortwave traffic is dwindling rapidly, and the channels we typically monitor have largely gone silent. Even the most resilient amateur operators across the Midwest have stopped transmitting. We fear many have fallen ill, or worse. Here in Ames, the air outside remains dangerously contaminated. Eleanor took air quality samples again this morning, confirming spore concentrations continue to rise at alarming rates. We now strongly suspect this isn't merely natural dispersion. There appears to be active fungal proliferation occurring rapidly in the ambient environment, particularly noticeable on open surfaces like sidewalks, roads, and even building exteriors. Through binoculars, we documented unusual, dense fungal mats forming on outdoor structures near our facility. In places, these mats have become visibly thick, almost fibrous. Eleanor hypothesized these structures might be releasing massive quantities of airborne spores continuously, dramatically escalating local contamination. How the fungus developed this capacity remains unknown, but its implications are devastating. Within our facility, protective protocols have intensified. Jake Alvarez spent the morning reinforcing ventilation seals and quadrupling the frequency of air filter changes. Despite these measures, microscopic analysis revealed small traces of fungal spores inside our previously secure laboratory section, suggesting possible minor breaches or spore infiltration via equipment or materials brought indoors. We've begun aggressive UV sterilization of all internal surfaces multiple times daily as a precaution. Regionally, reports received overnight have been sparse but deeply unsettling. Operator Liam Carter broadcast briefly from near Omaha, Nebraska, describing the complete breakdown of city infrastructure. Hospitals, clinics, and emergency shelters have been overwhelmed for days. Carter mentioned widespread power failures, significant fires downtown, and rapid deterioration of public order. National Guard units reportedly withdrew westward toward Offutt Air Force Base, abandoning urban containment efforts after heavy losses among personnel. From the south, operator Alex Trujillo transmitted a short message from near Tulsa, Oklahoma. He described severe refugee pressure from northern states, causing immediate strain on local resources. He reported escalating violence at checkpoints along Interstate 44. Trujillo warned explicitly against attempting southward travel, stating clearly that roads were impassable due to abandoned vehicles, panic-driven confrontations, and widespread fungal contamination. From Canada, we briefly heard from an operator named Jessica Fontaine, broadcasting from Regina, Saskatchewan. Jessica described catastrophic conditions, including near-total infrastructure collapse across the prairie provinces. Canadian Armed Forces units, initially tasked with evacuation and quarantine efforts, have reportedly retreated eastward toward isolated military facilities, abandoning urban containment due to overwhelming numbers of infected civilians and insufficient protective equipment. Internationally, we've had no new confirmed reports in nearly 24 hours. Asia, Europe, and South America remain entirely silent on all previously active frequencies. We have no clear assessment of the situation there, but we assume widespread collapse given previous trends. Scientifically, we made a troubling discovery today. Eleanor Brooks identified advanced fungal mycelium structures in tissue samples collected previously from infected animals. These structures appear capable of directly stimulating neural pathways within their hosts, particularly those responsible for aggression and motor control. If true, this suggests the fungus is directly influencing host behavior, not simply causing random neurological damage, but actively inducing deliberate behavioral changes that enhance its own spread. On practical guidance, given dramatically rising contamination levels, we strongly urge listeners to enhance your indoor isolation protocols. Reinforce door and window seals aggressively, using multiple layers of plastic, tape, or even caulk if possible. Continue continuous air filtration, using HEPA or activated carbon filters at maximum efficiency. UV sterilization lamps should be used repeatedly in all indoor spaces to minimize spore survival. Boil water extensively. 5 to 10 minutes of rolling boil before any use. Food preparation methods must involve sustained, high-temperature cooking or sterilization to eliminate spores. If respirators or masks are available, wear them indoors as well to minimize accidental spore inhalation. Do not under any circumstances venture outdoors without full hazmat protection, including sealed respiratory filtration. The fungal spores have become astonishingly concentrated in the ambient air, and even momentary exposure is extremely dangerous. On a personal note, morale within our facility has declined sharply over the past day. Jake Alvarez is exhibiting noticeable anxiety, increasingly worried about his sister in Omaha. Eleanor Brooks, though composed, is quietly grieving the lack of news from her family near Kansas City. Maintaining emotional resilience is difficult under prolonged isolation, constant threat, and limited outside contact. For myself, I've found moments of comfort in routine laboratory analysis, recording detailed scientific observations, and preparing these nightly broadcasts. Communicating with you all, even indirectly, helps mitigate the profound isolation we all feel. Yet the silence from previously active cities and operators has become deafening. It weighs heavily upon us, a stark reminder of how fragile our interconnected world has become. Still, we hold on to hope. Humanity's greatest strength has always been adaptability and resilience in crisis. We continue transmitting, hoping our words reach someone still listening. If you're hearing this clearly, we ask again, share your local situation, any effective survival methods, containment strategies, or simply encouragement to others. Any message you can provide strengthens our collective resolve and enhances survival odds across communities. I'll continue broadcasting nightly at 1800 hours Central Standard Time on frequency 14.300 megahertz as long as possible. Know that you are not alone. We remain here, listening, hoping, and sharing information. Stay strong, stay cautious, and remain hopeful even in silence. Today is August 19th, 2027. Frequency remains 14.300 megahertz. Broadcast time is 1800 hours Central Standard Time. If you can hear this clearly, please share your situation. Every transmission is vital now. Tonight's news, I must warn you, is the bleakest yet. First, our situation here has significantly worsened overnight. The facility's internal contamination level has reached critical. Despite stringent filtration protocols and repeated UV sterilization, spores have penetrated deeper into our secured laboratories. Eleanor Brooks and I identified fungal colonization on several critical internal surfaces earlier this morning. Containment procedures were immediately enacted, sealing affected labs, but the damage was already extensive. Our supply situation has become critical as well. Backup diesel fuel reserves powering generators are lower than initially calculated due to the increased demands of intensified sterilization measures. Jake Alvarez estimates 5 days maximum before we face total power loss. Without electricity, we lose UV sterilization, refrigeration, filtration, and communication capability, including this broadcast. Observations from our rooftop indicate catastrophic conditions locally. Ames is completely abandoned now, save for infected individuals. Large fungal mats visible yesterday have doubled in size, now covering entire streets, vehicles, and building exteriors. They visibly pulsate as spores disperse continuously, dramatically increasing airborne contamination. We've never observed fungal proliferation on this scale before. Regionally, the outlook is equally dire. Overnight, we briefly received a transmission from Sergeant Kara Bennett, broadcasting from near Fort Riley, Kansas. She reported near-total collapse of military containment efforts across the Great Plains. Fort Riley, once a primary evacuation hub, had become overwhelmed by infected personnel and refugees. Military operations effectively ceased after personnel shortages and spore infiltration within secured facilities. Sergeant Bennett described severe internal contamination, stating explicitly that major military bases like Fort Riley, Fort Leavenworth, and Offutt Air Force Base are effectively non-operational. Near Denver, Colorado, operator Robert Sandoval broadcasted briefly this afternoon. He confirmed mass contamination along Interstate 70, describing chaotic scenes as evacuees attempting westward escape encountered roadblocks near the Rocky Mountains. Local militias and surviving law enforcement, initially cooperating, fractured under resource pressure, resulting in violent clashes. Robert described major fires spreading unchecked through urban areas like Aurora and Lakewood, exacerbating contamination through smoke and ash. From the southern U.S. operator Alyssa Reed near Baton Rouge, Louisiana transmitted an urgent message. Alyssa confirmed severe refugee pressure, overwhelming local hospitals and emergency shelters in southern states. She described massive fungal outbreaks inside large refugee encampments near Houston, Texas, causing violent confrontations as authorities attempted forced quarantines. Alyssa stated bluntly that Gulf Coast states lacked resources and personnel to handle escalating numbers of infected evacuees. From the West Coast, our single update came from amateur operator Kyle Morgan broadcasting near Eugene, Oregon. Kyle reported widespread contamination in major West Coast cities, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, due to uncontrolled spore proliferation, exacerbated by massive wildfires, spreading unchecked across California, Oregon, and Washington. Wildfires were releasing enormous quantities of fungal spores into the atmosphere, further increasing airborne contamination levels regionally. He described desperate evacuees clogging roads heading inland toward Idaho and Nevada, finding little refuge there due to overwhelmed facilities. Internationally, we briefly heard from James Clark broadcasting from Auckland, New Zealand. James confirmed that fungal spores had now reached the southern hemisphere. Despite strict international travel bans, spore dispersal via prevailing wind patterns had infected New Zealand and Australia. James described major Australian cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, as effectively lost due to internal contamination, spreading uncontrollably. Emergency responses had collapsed, overwhelmed by scale and speed of the outbreak. Europe, Asia, and Africa remain entirely silent now. We've received no international updates apart from James' transmission. We fear global communication collapse is imminent. Scientifically, today's developments are equally troubling. Eleanor Brooks confirmed this afternoon that the fungal pathogen has evolved rapidly again, displaying unprecedented genetic adaptability. Its reproductive spores now survive sustained exposure to UV radiation, previously sufficient for sterilization. We are essentially fighting a pathogen capable of adapting instantaneously to nearly every antifungal strategy we employ. Additionally, Jake Alvarez analyzed global weather patterns using remaining satellite links, confirming fungal spores are traveling on prevailing winds across continents and oceans, explaining the outbreak's rapid worldwide spread. Weather forecasts indicate intensified wind currents due to ongoing wildfires and storms, greatly accelerating further global contamination. Practically, listeners, survival conditions are now dire. Air contamination globally appears catastrophic and irreversible in the immediate future. We strongly urge complete indoor isolation or outdoor exposure unless absolutely critical, even then only with full hazmat protection and respirators. Immediately reinforce air filters and seals within your indoor shelters. Employ continuous UV sterilization if still effective, and boil all water extensively. We must be frank. Your best chance for immediate survival is extreme isolation. The global infrastructure has largely collapsed. Food distribution, medical supplies, clean water, electricity, and fuel resources are critically limited or unavailable entirely. Do everything you can to secure immediate necessities locally. Cooperate closely with neighbors or trusted community members to pool resources and ensure mutual survival, but minimize direct physical contact due to contamination risks. On a personal note, morale within our facility has drastically declined. Jake's anxiety has escalated to severe stress, as his efforts fail to contain spore infiltration. Eleanor is showing signs of exhaustion and severe emotional distress after repeated unsuccessful attempts to contact her family. For myself, the psychological toll of daily reporting increasingly catastrophic events, while witnessing our own deteriorating situation, has become overwhelming. Yet we remain committed. As long as our generators last, we'll continue these nightly broadcasts. Communication, your transmissions, and ours is critical. Even as things worsen, your voice matters. We're gathering data continuously, hoping against hope it provides clues or eventual breakthroughs to counter this pathogen. Listeners, the coming days will test our resilience unlike ever before. It's vital we support each other however possible, even at a distance. Remain calm, maintain strict isolation, and keep your minds clear. Survival depends heavily on composure and rational decisions, despite emotional and physical exhaustion. I'll be broadcasting again tomorrow evening, frequency 14.300 MHz, 1800 hours Central Standard Time. Your updates, however brief, are essential. Share everything you can, your safety measures, your local conditions, and any useful information for others. Good evening, listeners. Daniel McCready, broadcasting again from the Crop Disease Research Facility in Ames, Iowa. Today is August 20th, 2027. Transmitting on shortwave frequency 14.300 MHz at 1800 hours Central Standard Time. If you hear me clearly, please relay your situation. Communication is more vital than ever. Tonight's updates reflect an increasingly dire global reality. First, conditions within our own facility have reached critical status. Overnight, our internal containment measures largely failed. Despite extensive UV sterilization and aggressive air filtration, spore infiltration is now widespread within previously secure labs and corridors. Eleanor Brooks conducted extensive testing this morning, confirming fungal presence in air ducts, filtration housings, and ventilation shafts. These spores rapidly colonize surfaces, forming visible fungal mats even indoors. Jake Alvarez estimates we have approximately 72 hours of backup generator power left, considering our drastically increased power usage. After that, without electricity, our air filtration, sterilization, and communication capabilities cease entirely. Our emergency fuel supplies are nearly exhausted, and attempting to secure more outside is no longer feasible due to extreme external contamination levels. Observations from the rooftop today indicate catastrophic local conditions. Fungal mats outside have proliferated dramatically, blanketing entire buildings and streets in Ames. Roads and sidewalks appear covered in dense, dark mycelial growth, visibly discharging spores continuously. The sheer scale of fungal coverage suggests unprecedented reproductive efficiency and growth rates. Regionally, developments are equally catastrophic. A brief, desperate transmission came this morning from operator Thomas Reed, broadcasting from Madison, Wisconsin. Reed confirmed total collapse of all emergency infrastructure in Wisconsin. Madison, Milwaukee, and Green Bay had become uninhabitable due to spore density. He described civilians attempting mass evacuation via highways, only to encounter severe blockages and spreading contamination. Reed stated plainly that survivors had resorted to desperate measures for shelter and resources, leading to escalating violence. His transmission ended abruptly, leaving his fate unknown. From Kansas City, we received a short transmission from Captain Amanda Scott of the Missouri National Guard. She confirmed the city was effectively lost to uncontrolled fungal contamination. Guard units, significantly depleted by infection among personnel, had abandoned urban containment positions. She reported mass casualties among both civilians and military personnel due to overwhelmed hospitals and insufficient protective equipment. Captain Scott's final message warned explicitly against traveling toward Kansas City or any major Midwest city, as contamination levels were unsurvivable without specialized gear. From the West Coast, we briefly received transmission from firefighter Ryan Grant, broadcasting near Sacramento, California. Ryan described catastrophic wildfires spreading rapidly across California, Oregon, and Washington state. Fungal contamination exacerbated by smoke dispersal had rendered urban areas completely uninhabitable. Emergency services ceased operations due to infected personnel and impossible contamination levels. He emphasized evacuees attempting eastward migration were stranded along highways, unable to advance, due to fungal outbreaks blocking travel routes. Internationally, brief contact this morning from operator Emily Whitfield, broadcasting near Johannesburg, South Africa, provided deeply troubling updates. Emily confirmed fungal contamination had rapidly spread throughout African cities, including Johannesburg, Cape Town, Nairobi, and Lagos. Severe infrastructure collapse due to overwhelmed healthcare facilities, loss of electrical grids, and critical shortages of clean water had triggered widespread social breakdown. International humanitarian organizations were reportedly unable to respond due to catastrophic conditions in their home countries. Scientifically, Eleanor Brooks confirmed disturbing new fungal behavior today. Detailed microscopic analysis of recent spore samples indicates the pathogen rapidly mutates under UV sterilization, effectively neutralizing our most effective remaining control method. More alarmingly, fungal mycelium sampled indoors demonstrated clear directional growth toward areas of human presences. Specifically, ventilation shafts leading into occupied lab spaces, suggesting fungal adaptation to detect and exploit human hosts. Actively. Additionally, Jake Alvarez confirmed through satellite imagery that global atmospheric conditions are now thoroughly contaminated by fungal spores, effectively encircling the planet. Prevailing winds and ongoing severe wildfires worldwide have accelerated the fungus's global dispersal far beyond containment capabilities. Global forecasts predict irreversible environmental contamination persisting for years, severely impacting any remaining agricultural production and food security. Practically speaking, listeners, we must be realistic about survival expectations. Indoor isolation remains essential, but increasingly difficult due to uncontrollable spore infiltration. Intensify all protective measures, immediately reinforce physical barriers, continuously sterilize interiors, and maintain strict isolation within your safe areas. Respiratory protection is now mandatory indoors and outdoors. Food sterilization through sustained boiling or baking at high temperatures remains critical. Protect remaining clean water supplies carefully, and sterilize all consumed liquids thoroughly. Emotionally, today has profoundly impacted morale within our facility. Jake Alvarez is experiencing severe stress due to unsuccessful containment efforts, deeply worried about his family in Omaha. Eleanor Brooks is clearly exhausted and emotionally drained, unable to reach her loved ones despite daily attempts. Personally, I find maintaining these broadcasts increasingly difficult under worsening conditions, but it remains my duty and privilege to continue communicating vital information. Despite catastrophic events, I want to emphasize our remaining hope lies in resilience, adaptability, and mutual support. Humanity has survived crises before, though never on this scale. Our immediate survival depends on disciplined, careful action, maintaining composure, supporting each other emotionally, and meticulously following survival protocols. Listeners, your communications matter profoundly. If you're receiving this transmission, Please continue sharing your local situation survival tactics, effective containment measures, and hopeful insights. Even brief transmissions provide critically needed data and emotional support. Tomorrow, I'll broadcast again at 1800 hours Central Standard Time on frequency 14.300 megahertz. I promise to continue broadcasting until our power is exhausted. Stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and take all possible protective measures immediately. Your survival depends entirely on cautious, disciplined actions now. Today is August 21st, 2027. Transmitting on shortwave frequency 14.300 megahertz at 1800 hours Central Standard Time. If you hear me clearly, please continue to relay your status updates. Communication remains our lifeline. Tonight's broadcast is especially difficult. In short, we are nearing a point of no return. The internal contamination within our facility is now beyond our control. Overnight, fungal colonization, inside ventilation systems, and filtration units rapidly intensified. Eleanor Brooks and I conducted multiple tests early this morning, confirming active fungal growth within laboratory spaces, storage rooms, and corridors previously secure. Visible fungal mats are spreading quickly indoors, actively emitting spores into enclosed spaces, significantly reducing safe zones. Jake Alvarez reports our emergency generator fuel supply is critically low, with approximately 48 hours remaining at current consumption rates. After that, complete loss of electricity is inevitable, ending filtration, sterilization, refrigeration, and communication systems, including these transmissions. There are no viable options to secure additional fuel externally, given catastrophic outdoor contamination levels. Observations from the rooftop confirm unprecedented fungal proliferation outdoors. Ames is effectively unrecognizable, fully engulfed by thick fungal mats, now several inches deep in many areas, rapidly encroaching on our facility grounds. Eleanor noted visible fungal structures beginning to envelop nearby buildings entirely, suggesting accelerated growth rates far beyond previous estimations. Regionally, recent brief transmissions have revealed catastrophic conditions. From near Sioux Falls, South Dakota, operator Ian Becker transmitted briefly this morning, reporting complete breakdown of city infrastructure, hospitals, and emergency response systems. Ian described scenes of mass panic, infrastructure fires, and desperate attempts by survivors to flee contamination zones via Interstate 29 southward, encountering severe blockages. Ian's transmission abruptly ceased, leaving his current status unknown. From Little Rock, Arkansas, radio operator officer Michael Jennings provided a short update describing critical refugee pressure overwhelming local hospitals and emergency shelters. Officer Jennings explicitly warned against attempting southward travel, describing impassable roads, violent confrontations at checkpoints, and extreme fungal contamination within refugee encampments. He confirmed that military and police resources were severely depleted due to infections and rapidly deteriorating morale. Briefly, we connected with operator Sarah Wilson, broadcasting from Phoenix, Arizona. Sarah reported severe water and food shortages due to disrupted supply lines, massive influxes of refugees from contaminated western states, and rapidly rising local fungal contamination levels exacerbated by regional dust storms and wildfires. Emergency services were reportedly non-functional, leading to significant civilian panic and violence. Sarah's final transmission emphasized extreme resource scarcity, urging listeners not to attempt travel to the southwest. Internationally, a single transmission was received from operator Matthew Clark near Glasgow, Scotland. Matthew reported catastrophic conditions across the UK, London, Manchester, Edinburgh, due to severe fungal contamination and infrastructure collapse. Military and government emergency efforts were reportedly non-functional due to personnel infections and depleted resources. Matthew warned explicitly against European travel, describing widespread civil unrest, severe resource scarcity, and irreversible environmental contamination. Scientifically, today's analysis provided alarming new insights. Eleanor Brooks discovered active fungal mycelium samples from inside the facility, displaying aggressive, neurological-seeking behaviors, actively moving toward living human tissue samples in lab conditions. These findings strongly suggest the fungus deliberately targets human hosts neurologically, potentially influencing cognitive and behavioral functions directly to facilitate its spread. The adaptive rate of this fungus is now categorically beyond natural evolutionary processes observed previously. Additionally, Jake Alvarez analyzed recent satellite imagery, confirming massive global fungal contamination, visible clearly from orbit, significantly altering atmospheric composition. He reported extreme disruption of global ecosystems, agricultural collapse worldwide, and confirmed unprecedented global climatic impacts due to extensive wildfires and spore dispersal. Long-term survival globally is now significantly compromised. Practically, listeners, immediate survival conditions are beyond critical. Complete indoor isolation remains mandatory, but increasingly challenging due to uncontrollable internal spore infiltration. Reinforce all interior seals continuously. Maximize indoor sterilization with any available UV systems. Maintain respiratory protection indoors permanently, and boil all consumed liquids rigorously. Avoid outdoor exposure entirely unless absolutely unavoidable, even briefly, and always wear full respiratory protection if venturing outdoors. Morale within our facility is critically low today. Jake Alvarez expressed severe emotional distress, overwhelmed by failing containment measures and anxiety regarding his family. Eleanor Brooks, though professionally focused, is clearly exhausted and increasingly withdrawn, profoundly affected by persistent family communication failures. Personally, these nightly broadcasts have become profoundly difficult emotionally as our own immediate situation deteriorates. Despite escalating challenges, we remain committed to these transmissions, recognizing their critical, informational, and psychological value for remaining listeners. Your updates, even brief, significantly sustain our morale and provide vital informational context globally. Listeners, as conditions worsen drastically, immediate survival now depends heavily on extreme discipline, meticulous caution, mutual cooperation, and emotional resilience, despite unimaginable challenges. Maintain composure, support each other emotionally, and remain rationally disciplined under increasing resource scarcity and extreme environmental contamination. Tomorrow, provided our power holds, I'll broadcast again at 1800 Central Standard Time on frequency 14.300 MHz. Every update received from you profoundly matters now. Please share your situation openly, effective survival measures, resource management advice, or simply encouraging words for others struggling. Your humanity, resilience, and mutual support remain our greatest collective strength. We have survived impossible odds historically through calm determination, adaptive ingenuity, and mutual compassion even when facing profound challenges. Stay disciplined, stay cautious, and protect each other vigilantly, listeners. Your survival depends entirely on careful, coordinated actions now. This is Daniel McCready, signing off from Ames, Iowa. Good night, stay strong, and take care of yourselves and each other. Today's broadcast will be somewhat different. Overnight, we finally established contact with a handful of surviving operators across North America who remain active. Tonight, I'll directly relay some of their transmissions, allowing you to hear their words firsthand. Communication now is more important than ever. Knowing we aren't alone matters greatly, even in times like these. First, last night, shortly after midnight, we heard from operator Hannah Mitchell near Asheville, North Carolina. Here's her brief transmission. This is Hannah Mitchell from Asheville, North Carolina. We're sheltering inside Mission Hospital's basement with approximately 20 survivors. Local contamination here is severe, almost every building downtown covered in fungus. We've lost nearly all communications. We have power, but fuel is critically low. Food and water supplies will last maybe a week at most. Anyone traveling near Asheville, avoid city entirely. We're trying to hold on. Please advise if any assistance is possible. After Hannah's transmission, at approximately 0100 hours, we received a broadcast from Lieutenant Mark O'Connor, near Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. His message was troubling. This is Lieutenant Mark O'Connor, Canadian Armed Forces, broadcasting from an emergency command outpost near Edmonton. Situation: here catastrophic. Military containment failed completely 3 days ago. Personnel infected rapidly. Massive civilian evacuations overwhelmed highways. Refugee groups stranded without supplies. Severe resource scarcity and fungal contamination everywhere. Our outpost has minimal defensive capabilities. Power is nearly gone. Communication limited. We urge remaining civilian groups avoid Edmonton region entirely. Maintain strict isolation. Then, at approximately 0230 hours, we briefly received a transmission from Miguel Torres, near Guadalajara, Mexico. This is Miguel Torres from Guadalajara, Mexico. City completely overwhelmed by fungus now. Public order gone. No electricity. No water. Survivors hiding indoors. But fungus is penetrating ventilation systems. Hospitals collapsed. Emergency services non-existent. People desperately attempting to flee northward toward rural areas, but roads impassable. We need help immediately. Urgent assistance required. Conditions worsening rapidly. Please advise, if anyone is listening, what can we do? Finally, early this morning, we connected briefly with firefighter Shane Ellis near Boise, Idaho, reporting dire local conditions. This is Shane Ellis, firefighter from Boise, Idaho. Conditions severe, massive refugee influx from coastal states, overwhelmed city resources, fungal contamination rampant indoors and outdoors, severe resource shortages clean, water almost depleted entirely, emergency services ceased functioning days ago, remaining survivors barricaded inside community shelters, attempting sterilization with UV lights, limited effectiveness now, Boise effectively lost. Please inform anyone traveling westward conditions, unsurvivable, here without specialized equipment. These first-hand reports clearly illustrate the severity and scope of global contamination. Remaining survivors face severe resource scarcity, extreme environmental contamination, and catastrophic infrastructure collapse. Maintaining isolation and disciplined protective measures remains essential. Within our own facility today, internal contamination continues spreading rapidly. Eleanor Brooks confirms significant fungal colonization inside critical facility infrastructure. Jake Alvarez reports less than 24 hours of generator power remaining. Without electricity, all sterilization, filtration, and communications cease. Our broadcasts will inevitably end when fuel runs out, likely tomorrow. Emotionally, hearing these transmissions has deeply impacted us. Jake Alvarez, listening alongside Eleanor and myself, visibly affected by first-hand survivor accounts, struggled emotionally throughout today. Eleanor, though exhausted and profoundly saddened, has maintained professional composure, diligently documenting data from each transmission, desperately seeking information to aid potential survival strategies. Listeners, we now face unprecedented challenges. Hearing firsthand the voices of survivors elsewhere provides emotional connection, mutual hope, and critical informational context. We urge anyone capable of transmitting, even briefly, continue broadcasting your situation openly. Your voice profoundly matters. Tomorrow, if generator power holds, I'll broadcast again at 1800 hours Central Standard Time, frequency 14.300 MHz. Continue relaying your local situation survival tactics, resource management advice, or encouragement. Even brief updates provide essential morale support and data globally. Listeners, remember, humanity's greatest strength historically has always been resilience, adaptability, mutual support, and emotional compassion in crisis. Despite overwhelming odds, disciplined action and collective strength remain our best survival strategy. Stay disciplined, stay compassionate, support each other emotionally, and remain hopeful even amid profound darkness. Your survival depends entirely on coordinated, disciplined actions now. This is Daniel McCready, signing off from Ames, Iowa. Good evening, listeners. Daniel McCready here, broadcasting for the last time from the Crop Disease Research Facility in Ames, Iowa. Today is August 23rd, 2027. It's now 1800 hours Central Standard Time. Frequency still 14.300 megahertz. I'm sorry to say, this is our final transmission. Early this morning, around 0400 hours, our diesel fuel supply ran dry, ending all power to generators. Jake Alvarez worked tirelessly attempting to sustain power as long as possible. But without fuel, we lost critical systems: air filtration, sterilization, refrigeration, and now, inevitably, communication. I have approximately 20 minutes of battery reserve left for this transmitter, so I'll keep this short and clear. Inside our facility, fungal contamination is now pervasive. Eleanor Brooks confirmed that fungal spores have thoroughly colonized the air systems and surfaces indoors. Our protective suits and respirators are still functional, but without active air filtration, internal contamination will rapidly intensify to unsustainable levels. We estimate facility conditions will become uninhabitable within 24 hours at most. We spent the morning documenting final scientific observations. Eleanor Brooks meticulously recorded fungal growth patterns, mutation adaptations, and survival tactics we've attempted. This information remains crucial for anyone still capable of hearing our transmission and is stored securely here, preserved in sealed containers designed to withstand extended contamination. If future teams ever regain access to this facility, those records may provide valuable insights. Outside, through rooftop observation, Ames is unrecognizable now. Thick fungal mats envelop buildings completely, visibly pulsating, releasing vast quantities of spores. The roads and surrounding landscape are coated extensively. Atmospheric contamination is catastrophic, making outdoor survival without advanced protective gear impossible. Our final contacts overnight from surviving operators painted a bleak, global picture. At 0100 hours, we briefly received operator Sofia Morales, broadcasting near Santiago, Chile. Sofia confirmed total collapse across South America, severe resource scarcity, and catastrophic contamination spreading, uncontrolled. Her final transmission warned explicitly that safe zones no longer existed on the continent. At 0240 hours, operator Andrew Jacobs near Perth, Australia, relayed desperate conditions, massive infrastructure collapse, and critical shortages of water and food supplies. Andrew stated that uncontaminated air was now effectively non-existent in major cities. Finally, around 0320 hours, operator Rebecca Sterling, broadcasting near Anchorage, Alaska, confirmed severe contamination even in remote northern communities due to global atmospheric dispersal of spores. Rebecca reported mass evacuations had entirely ceased, leaving survivors isolated without external support or resupply. With these final transmissions, we have effectively lost global communications entirely. Personally, I want to take this final moment to thank each listener who has transmitted, listened, and relayed messages. Communication with you all has provided essential emotional support, informational context, and sustained our collective resilience through profoundly difficult days. Eleanor Brooks wishes to express deep gratitude as well. She remains professionally focused despite profound emotional exhaustion. Jake Alvarez, deeply affected emotionally, expressed personal gratitude to everyone listening, asking specifically that we remain hopeful and supportive of each other wherever possible. Listeners, as we sign off, our final advice remains unchanged. Extreme isolation, meticulous protective measures, disciplined rationing of resources, and continuous emotional support for those around you. If anyone hears this transmission, hold firmly onto humanity's greatest strengther, profound resilience, and compassion in crisis. Our facility's research notes, observations, and recorded data remain here, safely preserved. If anyone eventually recovers this information, use it wisely and carefully to rebuild and prevent future outbreaks of this catastrophic pathogen. With my battery nearly depleted, I'll conclude simply. Thank you sincerely for your resilience, humanity, and courage in unimaginable circumstances. Whatever your situation, know that our thoughts remain with you. This is Daniel McCready, broadcasting one final time from Ames, Iowa. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Goodbye, listeners, and good luck.